All right. So when I spoke last time with Yorick, the idea I had was how are we going to ensure that security fixes go, first of all, stay public, and second of all,
Private?
stay private, yes, and second of all, end up on dev.gitlab.org so that we can build and deploy and then also release, but then also end up back to public repository. So with the introduction, future introduction of security projects that are private, we are going to have three places. We are going to have gitlab.com public, we are going to have security private, and we are going to have dev.gitlab.org private, but also place where we are building things from, right? So in order to ensure that we don't lose ourselves, we'll have to introduce a clear way of how things progress between these repositories. So my idea was gitlab.com public remains the source of truth for any work that can be public. That repository will automatically sync branches. So master will automatically need to be synced, but this is not going to be enough. Like, we are not going to be able to use project mirroring, because project mirroring just tries, if the branches diverged, give up. We will need to have a system possibly reusing the merge train that will try to actually merge the branches together. So this is master, this is all of the stable branches as well, so all of the backports. Because security private repository, we are going to think about actually having, as soon as something is ready, including the backports, have people merge things in those branches, right? So in order to keep those branches current with ongoing development, ongoing patch releases, and so on, we'll have to have the sync between public repository and security private repository done with a certain tool. I don't know what tool yet. So here's where it starts getting complicated.
Yeah, can I interrupt and just ask, for the, okay, assuming stuff gets merged into like the security repository as soon as it's ready, how do we then prevent that stuff from going to dev and getting included in a normal patch release, for example?
Exactly. So this is where the next part starts, the more complex part. We can't just do a plain sync between security and dev.gitlab.org anymore, at all. So .org will need to have two sources of truth. So one source of truth is gitlab.com, and another one is security private.
What does that look like? Because it's starting to sound like we're back at security branches.
It's as simple as this. So .com, private, security, .org. So .com will constantly try to sync to .org, and security will only be used to cherry pick things to dev.gitlab.org. So when we are ready to do something, we would fire off a tool, I don't know what, that will take all of the merge requests that have been merged here and do a cherry pick. And then that branch, the prep branch, would then be synced to dev.gitlab.org.
But I thought our goal for the security repository was to merge things directly into the stable branches.
Can you repeat that?
I thought our goal for the security repository was, well, I guess not specifically for the security repository, but for our current and ongoing security practice was to merge requests directly into stable branches rather than security branches or some other branch that we cherry pick from. So I'm like, if we're merging stuff now in security repository into, let's say 11.9 stable, but then we're not necessarily syncing 11.9 stable to dev until we're ready to do a security release. It seems like we're back at the original problem. am I misunderstanding?
We are back on the origin problem then. Yes, you're right.
I think we still have to operate how we are now, where we're not actually merging the security merge request until we're ready to do a release, and then that kind of stops the world.
Yeah, the problem is
in terms of non-security releases.
The problem is we can't do that. Like the reason why I'm thinking about this right now is we need to think about the world where we are going to have deployments automated.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like there is no more stop the world for us.
Well, yeah. Assuming we're doing daily deploys to production, which is the goal, right?
Yeah.
Then we do want to include every security fix we know about, but not necessarily publish those security fixes.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why .org is becoming a place where things are going to accumulate, and only when we are ready, we can then push to gitlab.com. So .com will always have this period of time where there's going to be a divergence between what we actually deployed versus what is actually public. So,
right, but then we can no longer build from dev because it might include things we're not ready to publish. Well, we can build from dev, we just can't publish the packages we build.
No. This is where the difference comes from backport branches versus master. So for backport branches, nothing is going to change. So current stable branches, it doesn't matter.
I see. Yeah, we're always going to build from master. Yeah.
So for stable branches, nothing changes. But for master is what makes this quite complicated. So basically what this will mean is we will constantly have to merge into master to ensure that gitlab.com is patched. But what we actually backport to previous releases will always have to be, I don't know how to say this differently, but when we are ready to actually publish the backports, right? So 11.8, 11.7, 11.6, whatever is in master at that point will have to be included in those branches. So we cannot have a situation where something is merged into master and it's not backported. So when we decide to do a critical security release, for example, backports and master cannot contain any other security patches that we are not ready to publish.
Correct. That gets really tricky.
Yes, I know. This is why I'm rubber ducking here. I've been bashing my head over this for like a long time now. Although
I mean, it's almost sounding like we need to build from somewhere other than dev.
It doesn't matter. We're just like, say, like with the move of security releases to gitlab.com private repository, dev gitlab.org is opening up for us for whatever we want to do. So, it doesn't have to be building it from somewhere else. That's going to be our somewhere else. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there is a reason why SaaS projects don't have public counterparts, right? Like because of reasons like this. And there is no, like I've been reading as well a lot, and there is literally nothing anywhere where people actually also use that repository to publish things to public, to open it up to public. So they always have like a private branch, and from our private branch, we always, do this, or we always have a private repository. And then from that private repository, we pick things that we want to get into the public. And that also adds a dimension of complexity, right? Like if we are to do that with fast moving master that we have, it's going to be like tricky to keep that updated.
Yeah.
So the best idea I have so far is ensuring that we always have one-way street, and it always has to be a roundabout, right? Like it goes from gitlab.com to security to dev, and then when we are ready, actually, let me change that statement. It's not only a roundabout one way. It's a Utrecht roundabout one way, which has a traffic light in the middle.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen those, but in Utrecht.
I don't know if I have. Yeah, but I get what you're talking about.
Yeah, so the traffic light is at the .org one. So things are gonna build up on it until we release it to public, which as soon as you speed up the traffic there, it's gonna become a big of a problem. So that means all of the work we are doing right now is definitely useful, right? Like everything that we can automate will mean that we can just quickly release. It doesn't matter, right? Like we can just, oh, you have two things merged into backports. Cool, we're just going to merge those and move on. Or, you know, 3 of those things. Basically, removing the buildup that we have with regular security releases. All security releases are going to become regular because they're going to be automated.
Correct. So yeah, for the backports of security fixes, they're getting developed and merged on the security repository.
Mm-hmm.
And then are those immediately synced to the stable branches on dev?
They have to. Like if they are merged, they have to. But they are not immediately synced to GitLab to GitLab.com public.
Right. They're only synced after a public release.
Yes, correct.
What happens in the case where we've merged a bunch of security fixes into, let's say, the latest stable, 11.9 stable, but then we decide
there is no no decision
right now?
No, there is no decision then. Like if we merge something into the stable branch, we need to.
But it sounds like we're continually merging things. So like a security fix could be merged weeks or months before we're actually ready to release it because we're waiting on other fixes.
No, we're not going to be merging it then, right?
Why not?
Why
it seems like I don't know. It seems like our goal is to merge it so as it's ready into the stable branches.
Yeah, that's true. But then as it's ready, that means I see what you mean.
Because as it is now, they are just like building up at this traffic light, and then we say, okay, we're ready to do a merge, so let's merge all of them. We're ready to do a release, so let's merge them all right now into the stable branches. Which is the only the only thing that's changed in the security process so far is that we're now merging directly into the stable branches, that kind of like on demand with the Oryx tool.
Okay, maybe.
But yeah, the way we're discussing it now, it sounds like we're not going back, but kind of moving back towards the security branches that are like, that stuff can be merged into immediately. And then when we're ready, we merge stuff from that branch into the actual stable branches.
Yeah.
Which, as we know, had its own problems.
No, it has its own problems. So maybe we need to split the problem in two. We cannot have the unified system for both master and backports.
Yeah, no, I think they're going to be discrete things.
They have to be two separate things. So basically,
because we're all like, for our own use, we're always going to be building from the dev master, which can include security fixes, because we're never merging master back to, well, yeah, we still do have to merge master back to .com, but at what point? It's after a security release.
Yep. That's our traffic light.
And at which point master on .com is vastly moved on.
Yep.
Well, I assume we're merging. Oh God, that's really complicated. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Honestly, I don't know at this moment.
Is your workaround? Maybe we need more rubber ducks. No, he's not yet.
No, it's. It feels like we need to change one of the variables we have, because right now we've been working with the same variables and the result is surprisingly is the same. Not surprisingly is the same. So something has got to give.
Yeah, it almost seems like we need to sometimes build from .com and sometimes build from dev, depending on whether we're doing a normal release or security release.
The problem is we cannot build from .com anything, because that is a circle of dependency. You can't build something that you're going to deploy on that same instance.
Why not?
Because in case GitLab.com is down, in case there is abuse, in case there is like a P1 item threatening GitLab.com, and we need to have a separate place where we can do this.
Sure. But I think in those cases, we can still build from dev, maybe, assuming it's not, well.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't, like so the major problem here is that we need to build in private while everything else is happening in public. Let's go through the process one more time in two cases. Mm-hmm. One case is master and another case is backports. So let's go back because they are
Jar's plan. It's looking like master is not even really master, right? We branch off of master with a specific.
This is just an intermediate step. We are currently like the intermediate step that Jar is going to be implementing is just branching and then building from that. But this is to speed us up so that we can get to a situation where we are going to build from master, right? Because this is a big process change that has a lot of possibilities of breaking things left and right. So I think backports are kind of simple because we can say that for backports, it doesn't matter. The backport branches are slower anyway, right? Like as soon as we create a stable branch, it just goes slower. And if we even decide to merge, to hold off merging security fixes in stable until we are ready, that is fine, because what can happen is we use the same tools, we merge when we are ready to release, and then we sync those branches to dev.gitlab.org backports, and then build from that, and then release to public, and then sync all of that to public repositories. That does not change. The problem here is master, that is fast moving, because we're not gonna release any package from master. Is that true? That is true.
Why is that true? I thought that was the point.
No,
not publish. We're not going to publish any package from master. Yeah,
we're not going to publish. We are going to build package from master, but we're not going to publish it.
Correct.
Then that means that the only thing that master actually does need to do is ensure that once we are ready to publish the backports, we can safely publish master branch to gitlab.com as well. So open it up as well.
Right, but in the meantime, the .com public master has to continually be merged into the private ones.
Yeah. Will there be a situation?
Sort of like the merge train, yeah.
Will there be a situation where we merge something in master, but we are not ready to merge that into backport or release it into backport?
Yeah, it's like a P1 security fix that we need live on .com.
Yeah, but for that, we are going to use a different tool. For that, we're going to use the patcher. Like we have to use the patcher. Not exclusively, but only until the fix is ready.
Have backport.
Yeah, exactly. So what happens with the P1 security items is that process needs to remain the same. Like we need to have a way to hot patch it. And that's what the patcher is going to be used for. And then we don't have to merge anything in master yet, right? Because we are going to reapply the hot patch as long as there is no backports.
That was my next question. Is the patcher ready to work? Like right now, it works on very specific version strings.
It's not ready. No, no.
Yeah. So like if we have a patch for RC8 and then we release RC9, it won't even apply it to RC9 unless we duplicate the patch.
We have an issue for that, or at least I think I know I spoke with Jarv about this specific situation.
Do we have an idea of what that looks like? Because I'm curious how we continuously reapply a patch even though there's not really a specific version string to compare against to see if we still need that patch, or do we just try to apply it, and if it fails we warn somebody?
Yeah, I think that was the conclusion. We are going to have to detach ourselves from version, right, like RC8 or whatever, and just try to apply it, and if it fails, abort the world.
Maybe it just needs, I don't even think it has to be that complicated. Maybe it just needs to be a Git repository with no folders and just like maybe one folder that's just patches. When we apply a patch to master, then we delete the patch.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it applies everything in there.
We're not going to delete it. We're going to move it to a separate directory, like history.
Sure, whatever. Yeah, but I mean, it's Git, so you have the history anyway. So I don't know why we need to move it.
I don't know. But that was the general idea.
Like everything in this folder gets applied. I don't care what the version is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the general idea. So the patcher is going to be used for that. So does it actually then matter? Because
we're master or not?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't then.
Not for GitLab.com, but
no, it doesn't, right? Because we are going to have to say now that you have a patch.
But we do want that stuff in master. I mean, eventually.
No, eventually. Yes.
Yeah.
But when we are ready to backport, right?
Yeah.
So then nothing changes basically compared to the situation we have right now.
As far as like building the package, no?
Yeah, the only difference is we are going to be abusing the patcher.
Yeah.
And I don't think there is a way around that. Like everything I read so far, there is no way around it.
No, it doesn't sound like it.
The difference is like in the Kubernetes world, right? Like with the Docker image, you can just build an image out of that SHA and replace it in your system. You don't have to publicize it. You can just rebuild on top of that. Yeah. It's basically a patcher replacement. So then it doesn't matter, right? Like if we are going to abuse the patcher for P1 items, we're going to have to build from master without the patch and then use the patcher to hot patch. But then we'll have to still say that everything that is ready for master and all the backports needs to be assigned to a bot, and then the bot will be merging things when we are ready to release. When we are ready to create a security release.
This is probably getting ahead of ourselves, but what happens? Well, like now, the developer has to create 3 backports, a master branch, change, and then also create the patch.
Correct.
And then we have to start worrying about what happens if there are multiple fixes touching the same area, and then the patches have to be applied in a specific order.
Yeah.
But we don't know that order because the developers are working off a different master at that point. They're working off.
Correct.
Yeah.
But we have the problems now as well.
That's true. But at least we're resolving it at the merge request point rather than during a deploy of the post-deploy patcher.
True.
Which, yeah, I don't even know what happens in that case. Does it just abort the deploy if it can't apply a patch?
It does abort the further deploy. And this also adds another dimension now because at least in the current situation, we kind of have a slower moving progression between staging canary, and production, and we kind of know where we are at. But with this faster movement, staging, canary, and production are always going to be different.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really tricky.
I don't know. I wonder, like, would it be?
I mean, that itself is really concerning. If we're getting to the point where like, hey, this production deploy didn't work, but it worked on staging. Oh, that was a different version.
Yeah, that is a really scary thing.
Okay, forget it. We're going closed source. We're just going to be a SaaS.
Yeah, I mean, there is a reason why no one is doing this. This is really freaking difficult. Yeah, there is. I'm saying like there is no other alternative. Having things build up on dev.gitlab.org, and only when we are ready to change the traffic light and release it to public, we can do it. In the meantime, there is no other way around it, which means there is a window of opportunity here where dev.gitlab.org might be collecting commits that are private for a month, 2 months.
Right. And that's a long time to avoid accidentally publishing those.
Yeah, regardless of what tools, what approvals, and so on you build.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is complicated.
Maybe the stoplight needs to be earlier at the security repository where stuff builds up there. That way we're never building from there, so we don't have to worry about that getting released early.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just living in the private repository.
Mm-hmm.
Then when we're ready for security release, we sync them to dev and build.
Mm-hmm. How does that help master them?
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
But we're not applying those security patches to master if we're doing post-deploy patches.
That's true.
So master on dev can always be master on .com, right?
Except when we decide to sync something from security.
Right, but at that point, we're already doing that release. And we've presumably been running those security patches for whatever, a couple days, a couple weeks. And we've already verified them on .com as fixing the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But no, that's really shit. Because yeah, let's say we've applied these post-deployment patches, but they're only applied on .com. So developers working on whatever they're working on master could kind of retroactively make those patches no longer apply because they don't even know that those changes have gone in.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea how to solve that problem. I mean, that problem kind of already exists because we're not merging stuff into master on dev, and they're certainly not pulling from dev, they're pulling from .com.
Mm-hmm.
So is it just coincidence it hasn't happened yet? I don't know. Or is it because, no, we create the master merge requests at the same time as the backport, so it's not a thing of, it's not a matter of them being newer.
So all of this would be simplified if we didn't have the requirement. So this is the value, the variable that we possibly could change.
Mm-hmm.
All of this could be changed if we don't have a requirement that security releases need to contain only security patches.
Sure, but
Is that true? Is that true?
Is it? I don't know.
I'm asking, like, is that true?
I'm trying to think through it. What does that get us?
So it gets us a situation where
We no longer need the stoplight?
yes, exactly. So, well, the stoplight exists still on master, but it's a fast changing traffic light. Because as soon as you merge it, we deployed it, we are ready to create a backport. We can just merge the backports and cut the release and publish, because regardless of what was already merged in stable, it can be like in the middle of a regular patch of release or whatever.
But I mean, since the introduction of the preparation branch, we don't even really merge stuff into stables periodically either. We merge them into the preparation branches. We run the automated cherry picker, and then that basically becomes the release. So it's not like we're merging stuff into stable with a long tail. It's kind of, we merge preparation branches, tag
when we are ready,
after waiting for builds, and then publish.
Yeah.
Have we not done like security prep branches before? That seems like what we're looking for.
That's called security
branches.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, but they never had merge requests. They were just, I mean, they never had singular merge requests. We had a bunch of merge requests merging into the security branch, and then we just merged the security branch directly into stable, which
yes, because there is
really
a difference. Because there is a difference, right? With security prep branches, you have one source of truth, and that is master, and you cherry pick from there. But for security prep branches for all the backports, that means you have 4. So 3 backports, no, or 3. 2 backports plus a master. No, or 3 backports plus a master. It depends.
Times 2, because
times 2, exactly. So then all of a sudden you have to babysit like what? 8 prep branches.
Yep.
Times how many security items you need to actually cherry pick into those.
Well, that would be automated the same way we do it now.
Right, but
yeah, I get your point.
You know that automation is not the biggest problem here. It's our pipelines that need babysitting.
Yeah.
Oh, so it failed in one of the 8 branches. What's happening here? Why did it fail? Mm-hmm. It stopped the train.
Oh, because we forgot to cherry pick that transient spec failure for that.
Yeah, that was 2 months ago, you know?
Yeah.
And now it's failing in 11.4, and it was not failing in 11.5, 6, and 7.
Yep. Oh, shit. 11.4 is still running Rails 4. Oh. Yeah.
That's why. Oh, my God. All right. So does changing that variable change things for us? You are ready? Let's look at it from the developer's perspective.
Mm.
I have my backports ready. I have my master merge requests ready. As far as I'm considered, my work is here is done.
Right, they're assigned to the bot.
They are assigned to, like, they have been reviewed and they are assigned to the bot. We say bot as soon as it receives a request, or as soon, like, periodically we check, the bot merges into all 4 or all 8, I guess. But let's say 4 backports for simplicity, a single code base. That means that as soon as this is merged, we can call a security release or a release. Doesn't have to be named security anymore. We call a release. That release creates all the packages, all the releases we need to do. And as soon as it's ready, like it already, because it's merged into master, it already got deployed to gitlab.com. And like together with everything else that was involved in master. And Backports might have already had some things fixed or whatever, right? Like it's non-security items as well. And as soon as the security item is merged, we call that release a security release because it contains a security patch.
But it might also contain other stuff.
Things. Yeah, other things as well. So it goes out of the door as soon as it arrives. There is no stopping for it.
Sure.
That does simplify it a bit, though, right?
A little bit. Yeah, I'm just not sure how much that's actually happening anymore. Is where we've got these fixes merged, not these fixes, but like these non-security patches merged into stable branches, but we haven't released them yet. It seems like we pretty much merge them and then release them like we would a security fix.
Yeah. But no, but my point is, yeah, sorry. No. I don't know what I wanted to say.
I think it simplifies it in theory, but I'm not sure how much it actually simplifies it.
Well, if it's all automated, or most of it, if it's automated, like it doesn't matter, because what I want to get away from is actually having to have release managers. I want to transfer this to developers. Say, oh, you want this to be backported? No problem. Create a merge request, apply a specific label, have the reviewer merge it into stable, and we'll have automation that will automatically like go through the label, and you know, if it doesn't see a security label, it can hold off, you know, for a week or something. I don't know. But if it sees a merge request that has been merged with the security one, it calls a release right away.
After one security merge request?
Yeah, why not?
Because then we're going to be doing
as many as we need. But the point here is it's going to be one security merge request triggers a release. That
I don't know. I don't
contains
think
other patches.
I think that's a bad look if like here's 11.9.2 with one security fix. And the next day, here's 11.9.3 with another different security fix. Here's 11.9.4 with a different security fix. I think you're gonna, well, A, that's just a bad look. And then B, I think people are lazy and they're not gonna upgrade their systems every day. So we're gonna have these published security patches out in the wild that,
yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, which one did I actually apply? I don't know. I think it makes more sense to group them up like we are. Here's 11.9.5 with one security fix and like a style sheet fix, because that's what we fix.
That's a good point. Oh my God, this is so complicated.
Yeah, it's very complicated. And it's all because, well, A, we backport, and B, we're open source.
We're public, yeah. That's adding quite a lot of complexity to this, because security inherently is not.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, we are, like, I've been trying to think about how do we address security vulnerability fixes in this new process where we are automating all the deploys and all of that. And with movement of security development from dev.gitlab.org into a separate repository that is going to be exclusively private, we add another level that theoretically should allow us to have specific sources of truth, right? Like public repository on gitlab.com will be the source of truth for the public. Security release, security repositories will be private and will be all the source of truth for all security fixes for developers, and for security folk. And then dev.gitlab.org in this case will be a private, separate instance where all of the items are going to be used for building. And we're going to be using that for triggering all sorts of deploys and like releasing the packages to public and so on and so on. So the original idea I had was .com public will be pushing to security private on a cadence, right? Like automatically or whatever. And security repository will just like developers would be able to merge. Like review went on, things got merged, and you move on with your life. And then .org would be receiving two things. Like I've been trying to draw it here, but it's, I don't know how much you see. But it would be receiving things from public automatically, but also when we are ready for security, we would then be like syncing security repository to dev.gitlab.org. Now, in theory, and obviously now dev.gitlab.org being the final stop, once we are ready to publish everything, it would just push to public, completing the circle. So one-way street. There is no way from dev.gitlab.org to go to security. It always has to be one-way street to simplify the process. Now the problem comes when we add more variables. First of all, backports. Second of all, master branch. Master branch being the biggest problem. Like we can theoretically figure out how to do all the backports because they're slower moving and like we have a bit more control there. But master becomes a major issue because if we say that we deploy to GitLab.com environments from private dev master, that means that this is the point where everything is going to build up. Because if we are not ready to release to public, we cannot publicize any of this. So that means GitLab.com is going to keep receiving things from that angle. And we cannot ever be sure whether what is currently on master on dev.gitlab.org can actually be published because we merged more things into it and we merged more security items into it. So then we come to a situation where how do we even get the items back into GitLab.com?
Right. So to start with what you first said, we have the private repo for security changes, and we have the public repo on GitLab.com. Both of these are on GitLab.com, right?
Yep.
So we have a security vulnerability, and we push a new commit to the private repo. At that point, the synchronization breaks because the private repo is ahead of the public one, right? Because you're
right.
So now everything, like the automatic synchronization is paused at this point, right?
No, because we would not be using simple project mirroring. It would have to be a tool like merge train.
Yeah, I see.
To ensure that that doesn't happen.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Continuously merging .com master into security master, whatever. And all the fun merge conflicts that could potentially bring.
Yeah, right. I have trouble seeing how this can be easy because on one side, we need this private repo, but on the other side, the source of truth needs to be the public one for most everything, right?
Indeed.
And that's the tension right there.
And I was even thinking, you know, every time I see something as complex as this, I'm thinking, okay, we are missing something and we need to simplify.
Yeah.
The problem is simplification only moves you in two completely opposite directions. One is everything needs to be public, which includes security fixes, which we cannot do, or everything needs to be private, which goes against what we are doing here.
Yeah.
Like there is very little option here for simplification.
Or we change that. I guess the final option would be to make the source of truth the private repo and only mirror, like make public, but that's also probably not an option, right?
Yeah, because exactly, because you would have to have all development there executed.
Community contributions, all of these things, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that introducing another repository, a private one, might actually be a counter, like a problem here, but it actually is not. It's like we have currently 2 repositories and we know how complicated that is.
I think the answer is probably no, but do we gain anything by the security repository potentially being a fork of the, like a canonical fork rather than a mirror? I don't think so, right? We don't have tooling to like update the forks.
Not to mention that chances of people accidentally creating a merge request to public is 90%.
Really bad idea.
Yeah, because it's like our merge request interface automatically points to the
That's true.
public, or sorry, to the canonical repo. So humor this idea for a second for me. Say devgitlab.org, where we build things from, is the place where things accumulate. The only difference between devgitlab.org and public repositories on .com is the security items that came in the middle of that process. What if we have a tracking system that will automatically create prep branches on .com, public repositories, when we are ready to publicize some of these items? So instead of having devgitlab.org sync everything it has, we say that the private security repository is our source of truth, and that will create the prep branches on .com public. And then when we are ready to, like when we are ready to publish packages, we create a merge request on .com, merge that, and then basically that clears up the path again for us, because theoretically it should just work. It's way more complex, but at least removes the need to constantly try to sync devgitlab.org when you don't really know what's involved there. And that would mean the devgitlab.org master or all of the backports will never sync back. So they're going to be the endpoint. So we are moving from a roundabout to just a one-way street. Well, one-way street that has streets in orthogonal to the one-way street. I guess I lost you all there.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking. I really want to make this simpler than what it is now, and I think everything we, like what you just suggested, I think it sounds slightly better, but it's still like almost as complicated.
Yeah, I'm kind of worried there isn't a simple solution to this.
I mean, it feels to me like we want to use the car to fly the sky, but only if the car always touches the ground.
Does moving security fixes to GitLab.com actually make this more complicated? Because now, instead of 2 repositories for GitLab CE, 2 repositories for GitLab DE, we have 3 repositories to coordinate between.
I was thinking about that, and I think it actually does not if you also include the other complexities that this brings. So for example, you know how it looks with developers and different accounts on devgitlab.org and so on. That complexity already introduces a lot of delays, a lot of problems for us. Removing that complexity clears up part of our time, everyone's time actually, and creates this, I'm going to call it like that, special bucket where security items are isolated, and it allows us, or the tooling, to actually control what goes out of that bucket into wherever else we want to put it. So I still think that having the 3rd repository does help out.
I'm wondering if well, like York built all this tooling to make the actual merge process easier. And I don't know if we've actually seen that do its intended purpose yet for a release to see like how that improves things. But then we still come back to the problem of like lack of visibility on dev, like lack of cross references and stuff like that. So I think it's probably still worth doing, but I feel like it is more complex.
I think it might be worth doing just because it makes GitLab.com the source of truth,
right,
for both security fixes and public, changes. And your sync to dev is always like, dev will never be ahead of GitLab.com. There'll never be changes on dev that aren't on GitLab.com. And I think that does make it a bit simpler. The only purpose of dev is essentially to run, the API for connecting to runners. Right? I mean, that's its primary purpose, and also as a mirror for the code. So in that sense, it makes it a bit, but it's that window of time when we diverge for these security changes and how to deal with it. And that window can be fairly large, it seems. Like we have a long time where we diverge because of security changes.
Yep. And I also kind of suggested, what if we just release as things get merged? But then Robert brought up a good point. That means that we might be having security releases or just releases in its own every day. Oh, fix the CSS issue, or like fix this vulnerability plus alignment
for
of
shipping a package. It just doesn't work. We have to bundle stuff up.
And I was also like kind of saying, even if we remove the backports, like the stable branches from the equation, and focus only on master, which is the biggest problem here, means that we'll have to abuse the patcher, which Jarview and I already spoke about. Like that's more than likely to happen anyway. But it still builds up things on devgitlab.org. It doesn't allow us a tool to simply just release that small fix to public. Because master will then possibly contain like more than just one security fix. Like if it's a critical one, we might have already merged some other security fixes. but we need to release just this P1 item because this is like super big. I wonder if there is like any room here for iteration to see how these things work, because we've thought about a lot of edge cases here, but I wonder like whether we can focus on covering like 50% of the cases and then like scrambling for the 50% other.
Right. Yeah, I mean, how far away are we from moving security changes to GitLab.com? Has that decision already been made?
That decision, okay, I'm gonna stop the recording now because I wanna put this on YouTube. Okay, here's another idea. Is it the end of the world if we have a divergence between what we deployed on GitLab.com versus what is actually released to public?
I mean, that happens all the time with security fixes because we patch.
Right, but what I'm saying here is if we don't, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
York said it'll be available in like 5 minutes.
Sounds good.
If you feel like explaining all this the third time.
Well, not me. Probably one of you will do it this time around. Here's another unpopular idea. And unpopular with me because we did it before and it was terrible. GitLab.com had its own repository. So before we had GitHub Enterprise Edition public, we had GitLab.com Enterprise Edition that contained some of the fixes that we then backported into Enterprise Edition. It was terrible because it was only like, what, a couple of us back then. Maintaining that diff was terrible. But I'm wondering whether we are at that point again to consider it.
Yeah, not that this is a good reason for it, but I know Sid has always been adamant about like we run what we, like there's no separate version.
No, I know that, but this would not be a separate version per se. It would just be
It's a temporarily separate version.
yeah, that like version that
I mean, we do that
diverges.
anyway with patches, but
Yeah, but you know how much time we need to do, how much time we need to spend to change the patcher as well now to get this new system in place.
Jar wasn't here for that, but my suggestion for the patcher was basically, right now we have a bunch of patches in folders per version where I think we just need to have one folder with a bunch of patches, and if the patch is there, it gets applied, and then when it's released, we delete it.
Best effort, kind of. I think it's relatively safe now, and we could do it, at least we could do it by release instead of by RC, or, you know, like we could just do by major.
Do 11.9 rather than 11,
and then you just try the patchers, like it does it in dry run first. If it's already been applied, it won't try to apply it twice. It's safe in that way, but
can it distinguish between a patch that's already been applied and a patch that is now conflicting?
Well, the thing is that it's using the BSD Unix patch tool, so it basically tries to apply a patch and can kind of tell if it's already been applied. But there's certain, when you start having patches on top of patches, it gets a bit hairy, and
Right.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether we want to rely on it in that way.
So here's the thing, when I was speaking with a certain company representatives, they definitely fork things. So they do things from private and then they try to backport. And that fork is always private. But the problem is their development happens in private. So it's not a difference between what they do day to day when they have to fork something. So for us, it would probably be a difference.
I think a diagram would actually be helpful here. I just started to sketch one out myself, because to me it seems like we have three repositories, right? We have the public repository on GitLab.com. We have the private repository on GitLab.com, and then we have the repository on dev that, when pushed to, triggers a deployment right? So all the work happens. So I think what you showed me, the diagram that you have, shows that the sync works between the public and private repository on GitLab.com, and then dev is synced from the private repository on GitLab.com, right? It always goes in that direction.
Yeah.
So we have, let's say we're deploying from a branch, like we're planning to do for this auto deploy stuff. So we have a branch called 1011 XXX, or just 1011. And anytime we push to that branch, then a deployment is triggered from dev. In the normal case, that commit would be synced from the public repository to the private repository, then from the private repository to dev, and then the pipeline would kick off from dev. And that's like the normal workflow for getting builds to production. They go to staging first, and then they get promoted. Okay, so now we have a security vulnerability. We need to make the commit directly on the private repository without going to the public one first. So the developer clones the private one, he makes an MR, he merges to the 1011 branch. Now, this is kind of where I think this still works fine, right? So if we have the merge train working between the public and the private one, should be okay, hopefully, unless if there are conflicts, but let's assume it's okay. And I don't even know if it's a problem. If it's not okay, it's not the end of the world, right? Like, it just means that the sync will fail, and the pipeline that deploys to production will be stopped. And right?
Yep.
So, so now the question is where is the pain here? The pain is like when we have to get those changes back into master, right?
Timing of that, and how long does that delay deployment? Because if it's, days, then we have a buildup of different sorts that we know what happens when we have a buildup of different sort that needs to end up on GitLab.com.
Yeah. I think what I would say for a first iteration is right now we're thinking a weekly cadence for these new stable branches that we're calling the auto deploy branches. So it's at the end of that week, then the decisions need to be made, right? You have this you have this security commit on the private repo, and it hasn't been merged to master, and you want to create a new auto deploy branch. You want to create a new branch on Sunday, but it needs to have that security change. The job that creates the new auto deploy branch could try to merge the changes. This is kind of ugly and hairy, but it could handle this, right? Like it could actually move those commits to the new branch.
Could it do something like Patcher, try to reapply things, as in create again a new thing from master, and then the items that are labeled security and like whatever, labeled with security and something else, they get cherry picked again?
Yeah, so the way I'm thinking is that week 1, you have 1011, okay, you have 1011 week 1 branch that exists on the public and private repo on GitLab.com. The private repo has some extra security commits. Okay, week 2, the job that creates the week 2 branch creates it on the public repo. That would be just from master. It also needs to sync to the private repo, but it could be smart enough maybe to try to merge the previous, like.
Right, I know what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think it should probably do this anyway, because there should be no commits on these auto deploy branches, the ones that are created every week, that aren't merged to master. Our method for getting commits into the auto deploy branch is to add pick labels to MRs that have been merged into master, right? So we could look back the previous week. This is kind of hairy, not very nice. The alternative is to just stop. Like we could just stop the auto deployments until we get these security changes into master. And it would really suck if we had a security vulnerability at the end of the week and it would stop, but it would stop the pipeline. But maybe we should be, I mean, to be honest, once the security changes on GitLab.com, there should be nothing preventing us from, making the security fix public. And
there is timings. Like when can something be released? That's also another problem. Like security team requires us to have announcements when doing things like that. So we can't just like publicize it, because that puts customers at risk, which makes sense.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking like maybe that process is too heavy for publicizing it, and maybe we can spread the burden around a bit more. I'm not sure, like maybe it's asking too much for security to be creating a blog post within 24 hours. I don't know. I
mean, this is where I was speaking with Robert, not in this call, but earlier. Like I think we need to have a template for this thing. Like it should be completely unattended, right? Like, and if they want, like if someone wants to add something to it, they can already do that on a blog post that is ready, right? So have everything prepared for them, and okay, now you need to actually add something. Well, edit it and then merge it, right? Like it doesn't matter. But it would be like, I have created a merge request, CC, security, whichever team, deadline this.
Yeah. I think like the worst case scenario would be that we would stop our continuous deployment pipeline for how long? Maybe 2 weeks? I don't know. What's the time frame we're talking about? Because it's kind of hard to reason about this without.
Depends on the vulnerability itself.
Yeah.
If it's P1, then, possibly. Yeah.
And then what it means is that until that deadline is passed, the only way to get changes into prod is to add pick labels, right? Because we're not taking from master, we're just cherry picking changes in. And I would say we take the approach first where we halt the pipeline,
Mm-hmm.
and then we see what happens after that. If it ends up being like that, if it ends up slowing us down too much, then we can look into perhaps picking the changes from the previous release or the last week into the new week, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe.
Okay, so I do think you said a bunch of things there that are actually useful. So limiting the scope is number one. Making sure that we don't think about continuous master, but thinking about this intermediate step of having auto deploy branches.
Yeah.
That's number one. And number two is when we have those auto deploy branches, thinking about from where we are creating them. Like if we are creating them constantly from master, we also need to ensure that the previous branch is merged in, or we just create, or we just keep using one branch that gets a master merge into it. And then we all of a sudden have a deploy branch. Yay!
Another thing we can do, Marin, maybe is we simply have a label on an MR until it's merged into master that we can query for, so that when we create these branches, this would be the MR on the private repo, right? Like, and until that MR is merged into master, that label is present, right? And that way, whenever we create the new set of branches, when I create the branch, or when we create the branch on the private repo, I look for this label and I make sure I can pick any outstanding security changes that have not been merged into master. Does that work?
That would work as well, I think.
So it's like a new pick label, you know, and it's basically just something that we know, like this is a security change that hasn't been merged into master yet.
Unreleased.
Yeah, or something like that, yeah. But maybe this can come later. Like maybe we just say we halt the deployment pipeline first, see how far we can get with that, and then.
Yeah, I'm up for that, because we've seen how complex this gets when we start to think one step past that. What do you think, Robert?
Yeah, limiting the scope of it is something.
All right. Cool. Yorick, you came late to the party, but the party was not really fun, so you didn't really miss out on anything. I think I'd like to end the call here then, and